morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the country, and welcome to another webinar in our winter webinar series, which we're going to continue all through February and March. Got a lot of topics to cover, and today our presentation takes about 50 minutes. In fact, if I look at the little thing here, 51 minutes and 26 seconds for accuracy. I can be here all day. All the while that the video is on, but it is pre-recorded. But I'll be answering the questions live in the chat if you want to take part. We currently are waiting for a few people to join before we kick off. Oh, here they come. They just come flooding in bit by bit. Hello, everybody. All those of you just joining late, I'd like a little note of apology. Why are you late? do you remember it was like that at school where if you turned up late for the lesson, there would be 100 lines back in my day. I'm sure they don't do that now, but it used to be, I must not turn up late for the lesson. Yeah, they're ticking away. Who have we got? Oh, Amar Al-Shaban. Hello, Amar. How are you? You're joining us from Facebook as well. I'll be saying hi to everybody whilst we're going live. We've still got a few people more joining. Oh dear. Good evening from not so sunny Leeds in the UK. Oh dear. I'm sorry about that. It's actually glorious sunshine here in Dallas, and I never ever regret having to going to the USA and getting the lovely sunshine. But sorry about that, Leeds, but what can I say? You have better fish and chips than we do, so I don't feel that sympathetic for you. What else have we got? Oh, hi there. Mustafa says hi, good night. Hello, Mustafa. People are still joining in. Greetings from Bavaria, Michelle. Hello there. You're one of our frequent flyers, which is our little term for you nowadays. Michelle's been here almost every week for the last few weeks. Gregor, hi from Switzerland. Efrain Angeles. Hola desde Mexico. Hello. Hola to you too. Mustafa is from Turkey. Woo. Is this for desktop app or web app? Amar is actually covers the broad range of spectrum for cloud apps. So the presentation is going to cover creating apps that can either work in web browsers or can stand alone and do stuff on the web, and then pushing it down onto the machine. Hello from where did I just see that? Dank and dreary in Chichester. Oh, it is winter in the UK, so what can I say? It is good. Marco says hi from Mexico. Good evening from Slovakia, from Hamburg. Hello, Nils. Einstein 8854, who's another person that comes very frequently to these webinars. Hello from France and Nantes. Charlie Chambers, he's always here as well. I'm assuming you're Mel, but Charlie comes from Aurora. Malvern flying wow. He's up a hill in Malvern. That's very impressive if you're actually sitting on a hill and listening to this. Malvern's a beautiful place, and Malvern water is good spring water. Bom dia from Brazil. Rasta e Solta. I'm not going to do everybody right now. I'll say hello to you individually, but from Zagreb and just about absolutely everywhere you could imagine. It's really good to have you all joining. Okay, well, I think we're going to go live to the video. I'm going to answer your questions in the chat window. So if you ask the questions, if you have any, the video, like I say, lasts about 51 minutes, but I'll be here all that time behind the scenes, even if you can't see me live. And at the end of it, we'll do a Q&A as well if we've got any questions. Okay, but we'll be back soon. Let's play the video. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to how to create a real app that runs in the cloud. My name is Ian Barker, and I'm the Embarcadero Developer Advocate. You can email me whenever you want at ian.barker@embarcadero.com. I answer every email, I really do. Well, so far we've had a pretty packed schedule. We've covered Android apps, iOS apps, Christmas came along, and we also created a Windows app. We then created a similar app using the Mac, and we even had a webinar about Codelec, which is a really fascinating UI tool that creates the back-end business logic, all the complicated stuff that nobody wants to do and has to be done, but it's a little bit of boring legwork. And last time we did 2 webinars as well, which was one to how to create a real Linux app. We actually saw it running on Ubuntu, I think was how I showed it. And then on the Friday, we had a really great webinar with Andy from Secure and showing us the static analysis product that allows you to look at your app and examine your code and find out if it's vulnerable to hackers. He covered quite a lot of things like static code analysis, dynamic analysis, supply chain security. Very, very interesting stuff. And we'll be looking at that again another time. And today we are covering how to create a real app that runs in the cloud. Next time we'll be looking at how to create an app for the Raspberry Pi. But we're not finished there. We've got a whole packed schedule for all of February and March, covering all sorts of features. And also Delphi's birthday on February the 14th. We're actually going to have the webinar the day before because I want to keep it on Tuesdays. And it just so happens that this year, February 14th, in the year that we're recording, is a Wednesday. So we've got other things to do that day as well. But we're going to do a retrospective, pardon me, a retrospective, a view back of the history of Delphi and also Turbo Pascal, because Turbo Pascal recently turned 40 years old as well. So there's a lot to talk about. Well, what do we mean when we say the cloud? What exactly is that? Well, the cloud in this context means the internet. It's nothing more complicated than that. Sometimes people think it's some kind of literal cloud. Some people think it's a series of different weird machines and things like that. And really, basically, what most people say is the popular way is of looking at it is it's running your program on someone else's computer, and it really is as simple as that. You're basically running your computer either on your own server that is connected to the internet. I wouldn't probably recommend running it on your own PC, but it could be your own PC, or more likely it's someone like Amazon or Azure or somebody like that, and you're running your program on their servers, their computers. With RAD Studio, we've actually got a lot of different options built in, and just as many that are third party. Creating apps for the cloud and for the internet is probably one of the most popular things that you can do with Delphi and RAD Studio in general. It's actually relatively easy to do. The difficulty is working out which set of components you want. Not are there components to do it, but really which ones should I use to achieve that objective. And so one of the options is the one that I've got highlighted there, and that's Web Broker. Web Broker is included with RAD Studio. It creates non-visual server-side applications. So they don't run on someone's PC, they run on the server, and they then output or emit, or however you want to sort of say that, sends HTML, so web pages, and XML packages, and it uses events to construct that. So when something happens, like someone wants to view a particular page or particular resource on the internet, an event is triggered, and then you can use a type of template substitution to create the HTML content. It's very, very powerful. It is a slightly older way of doing things. It's been around for quite a long time. As you can see highlighted there, there's all sorts of different types of dispatchers, as they're called, and producers that allow you to create all sorts of content. You can have it linked to a data set and basically surface a data set out to the internet. And you can even include some other things to like dynamic web pages. I also noticed, as you can see in there in the internet tab, there's a thing that says T-Edge browser and T-Web browser. These are not the same thing. Those are actually client side, and they basically allow you to create your own web browser and include web browser or web pages in your own application. So they're not really for the cloud as such, They're more for client-side displaying something just as if you are a web browser. And in fact, using Edge browser or the TWeb browser, you could actually create your own web browsers, and some people do. You can have your own custom web browser that only allows people to go to certain options, for example, or something like that. And I think, I could be wrong, but Edge browser I think is used in RAD Studio in the welcome pages, but don't quote me on that. I don't really pay a lot of attention to some of those things. I should do, really, shouldn't I? Built-in options for Windows and Linux using Page Producer and Web Broker. You could create a standalone console application. Basically, this is a bit like a command line DOS app or terminal app, or however you want to think of it. When that runs and keeps on running, and that then will respond to requests from client apps and client pages, and will basically keep running in the background and until you terminate it. Apache Dynamic Link Module. This runs inside an Apache web server, and this allows you to create any kind of content you want and get it served up by the very popular Apache web server. It's actually a very powerful way of doing things. There are some slight complications to do with what you do with Apache, because there are lots of rules to do with Apache. And Apache is still probably the most popular web server out there, web server software. So you'll run Apache on a server somewhere, and then your dynamic link module is picked up by Apache. There's a whole set of documentation from the Apache project that tells you how to do this, and you can generate content on the fly. It's quite popular. It's used for things like special authentication and special delivery of content and stuff like that. A lot of people use it for that and swear by it and think it's great. Other people say no, it's not for them, and they do it in different ways as well. The other thing you can do, and again these all work for Windows and Linux, and that is create a CGI standalone executable. What do we mean by that? Well, your web page, and it could be Apache, it could be Nginx, it could be any type of other web server, will know how to run CGI executables. And what a CGI executable does, it's a bit like a standalone app, except it runs once and then terminates. Generally speaking, it's creating some specific content as a one-off shot. It could be that it's got a single job, like maybe to convert an image, or maybe to return a set of images from a database based on some command line parameters that are sent to the standalone executable. So standalone console application runs and keeps running, and the CGI standalone executable runs once and then terminates. Apache, Nginx, and all the other web servers understand how to run CGI, and it's very, very easy to do. It's not at all complicated to create. Other options which are only for Windows, and that is a standalone Windows application. That's exactly what it says it is. It is an application that runs just like any other Windows application, except it serves up web content. And that web content again could be HTML or XML, depends on your use case. We're not actually going to cover these kind of use cases right now, but just so that you know that you can do it with Web Broker. The other thing which is actually very popular, and it's in the Microsoft world, which is why it's Windows only, is ISAPI Dynamic Link Library. This is a special DLL type which is usually used with Microsoft's IIS, or Internet Information Server, which I think is what the acronym stands for. Again, very popular. ISAPI has a few complications. When I've written things in the past, you can get some problems to do with restarting ISAPI DLLs and things like that. It creates a lot of state, shall we say. It understands that it stores how it's running and things like that. It's just something, once you get into it, you'll discover the issues, Google the answers, and you'll go, oh, okay, that's what it is. It's an ISAPI problem, not actually a RAD Studio problem. But it is very popular. It is one of the options you can use for creating an app. It's usually used just like all the others, like the standalone application and the CGI application. It is used to serve content up just like the Apache module does, except it works for Microsoft's IIS. Microsoft probably are third, I think, second or third in the world in terms of providing web servers. But in the corporate environment, in business environments, IIS probably rules the roost for a significant proportion of people. So it's definitely something you shouldn't ignore. But you should know that those options are available, and there's some wizards that will help you create those. Other built-in options, these are a little bit more work. In the sense that you have to do some of the creating and putting together of things yourself. And probably the biggest one that's out there is a thing called Indy. Indy is extremely popular. I mean, fabulously popular. A lot of people either have these options themselves and use them, or they've created products on top of the Indy servers, on top of the Indy components. The types of servers that you've got available are actually quite specific. So for example, you can see there's a UDP server, and you drop that on your app, create a few events, apply a few properties, and drive a few properties in your code, and you can communicate using UDP, which is a very popular method of communicating across the internet. It also supports things like FTP servers, finger server. Our finger server goes back to a command called finger on Unix years and years ago. Same with echo and all these other things. Some of these servers you're never going to use. Very few people use finger nowadays, but back in the day when I used to be a Unix guy, finger was one of the ways of knowing what a server supported, and that's what that is. So you can see there's all sorts of kind of specialized ones. TCP server and UDP server are probably ones you're going to use the most. A HTTP server and a HTTP proxy server also are very popular, and an FTP server. FTP allows you to load files up and down to a server, and again, very popular. There are lots of programs out there like FileZilla, which is an FTP client, and many others as well, Transfer and a few others. Indy includes things like mail handlers and MAPI and POP3 and just about anything you could ever want. It is very widely used. There are some areas which can be a little bit complicated, and it can be a little bit tricky to get right. The one of those is SSL, which you need to secure things like web pages so that they are serving up HTTPS and have that little padlock, or just to encrypt your communications for email. You'll find that some services like Microsoft Exchange and Outlook communications, and even Google, will require SSL. Or actually TLS is a type of similar encryption. Google, for example, to use G Suite, if you're a corporate user, you'll find that there are very specific settings for G Suite in terms of the type of encryption. So TLS is one of them, and it wants something like level 1.2, I think, or something like that. But again, this is probably more in depth than we need to go into right now, but just so that you know, Indy is the thing, and sooner or later, if you use RAD Studio long enough, you're going to bump into something that either uses Indy, or you're going to want to use it yourself. Most people will kind of see it as a must-have option. There are alternatives out there, and ICS is one of them, for example, and ECGC also do some options and things like that as well. But Indy is built into the system, and when you open a palette, you can go down there and there's Indy servers. And also, what I haven't shown here is there's an Indy clients tab as well. And the Indy clients tab allows you to do things like create a mail client. So not only send email, but receive email. Calendar, iCal type options as well. Just name it, and there's some kind of client or server, and Indy's probably got an answer for it. Extremely popular and very well written system. Other built-in options, DataSnap. DataSnap used to be known as Midas, and what this is used for primarily is for middle-tier database uses. DataSnap is it's a very easy way of getting your data out onto the internet or across some network, so that people connect to your DataSnap server, and then your DataSnap server connects to your database server. It's got some very interesting features. One of the main features is that client apps are being able to invoke or call server functions, and for the server to automatically notify the client apps of changes and feedback. It does this in a very clever way, and you create a number of functions in the DataSnap app, or Midas app as it used to be, and then call those remotely. Again, it's not something I'm going to show today, but if you are interested in that kind of thing, then DataSnap is included, and it's very well respected. Go to the DataSnap server or DataSnap client options. The RAD Studio help and samples also has some DataSnap client server examples there as well. Other built-in options: RAD Server. RAD Server is a very interesting product in that it is enterprise level middleware and endpoint server. Now, it was originally created as an application server. If you are familiar with Tomcat, which is used for Java apps and things like that, then RAD Server was originally written to kind of not combat that, but also be along those lines. It's kind of evolved over the years into more like a middleware server, in the sense that it can work via REST and JSON. JSON is the JavaScript object notation. It allows you to encapsulate or encode or represent, shall we say, objects using effectively plain text. Basically, the whole of the internet works on JSON. If you don't know how JSON works, and you can see it spelled out there, JSON, not JSON, JSON, you should probably read up on it. It's actually not difficult, and if you've used most other markup languages like rich text or something like that in the past, then JSON will make sense. XML is very similar. JSON, once you start dealing with the internet, you need to understand how JSON works, because it's just everywhere. REST is the same. RESTful services are ways of being able to call things on the internet, either with the URL or URI, should we say, and do what are known as CRUD operations on data, for example. So create, read, update and delete is what CRUD stands for, and REST allows you to do that in a fairly easy way, in a stateful and non-stateful way. It can also support, RAD Server also supports things like user authentication, which is one of your biggest headaches, because once you put something on the internet, then you've got to start looking at security and making sure that things are not going to go kapow as people hack them, and you will face hackers. I've seen it repeatedly. It supports things like push notifications, which are actually quite handy, alerts, shall we say, down to the clients, geolocation and data storage. It integrates closely with the built-in FireDAC database components. If you've not come across FireDAC yet, we are going to do a session on databases, and in fact a couple of sessions, and we're going to look at what FireDAC does. FireDAC is the RAD Studio database access layer, shall we say, or group of components, and allows you to communicate with most types of databases out there. Everything from MySQL to SQL Server to Oracle, you name it. It's very powerful. You can use FireDAC just like the old-fashioned components if you're an old Delphi 7 user or something like that, but it's also got some very interesting capabilities where it can do things like update records automatically and return arrays of data, and some very interesting stuff, but we'll cover that in another session. So RAD Server integrates with that very closely. It is designed to be optimal that way. RAD Server does have some charges associated with it. So deploying RAD Server, it depends on whether you've got enterprise or architect, and you must have enterprise or greater. Depending on whether you've got enterprise or architect, then there may be some charges for licensing it or using it and deploying it out there. I think for enterprise you get 1 license or something like that, and architect I think is unlimited. But again, look at the product matrix, because I always forget this when I'm recording these things live, and I should take notes ready, but yeah, hey, a little bit of homework there for you to look these things up. Where will you find the built-in options? Well, if you go File, New, and up will come this dialog that you see here, and then you can see some of the options that are available. So if I was going to create a new DataSnap module, which has got a server module that does all the handling of the requests and serving up the content, click on DataSnap and then server module, and off we go. It creates a server module for them. If I want to create an entire DataSnap REST application, again, we just talked about RAD Server supporting REST as well, then you can create a DataSnap server with support for REST directly from there. These are 99% done, in the sense that if you create these particular options, most of the work is done for you, and you just need to put in what content you're going to serve up and link it up to a few databases or methods and functions of your own. You can see there's all sorts of options, and if you look very closely in that dialog, and I've tried to make it as big as possible, you'll see that it marks which ones it supports. So for example, for the server module, that particular one only works on Windows, but the REST application works on Windows and Linux. The more interestingly, and this is probably where one of the strengths of DataSnap is that the client module can be almost anything. So it will work on Windows, it will work on Linux, it will work on Android, and it works on mobile and desktop. That's what it's trying to say there. Very, very useful. But you can find all of the other options there, and in fact you can see I've got some third-party solutions in there as well, like TMS and a few others. But that's where you find them, on File, New, Other. Okay, some other options that are included or available with RAD Studio includes the Apache AWS SDK. This is a really interesting SDK. Now, if you're used to add-ons and packs and of components, adding a lot of little components in your component palette there, AWS SDK from Apache is not quite like that. There are a couple of components, and I think there's some more planned in the future, but this is an API that you use by including in your uses clause. And when you do that, this gives you the opportunity to access many features on AWS. Amazon's AWS, which AWS stands for Amazon Web Services, very comprehensive, all sorts of features on there that are very useful to people for running things in the cloud and actually interacting with things in the cloud. If you've seen my space computer demo, where I have a kind of Star Trek-y type computer, I was able to add the ability for the space computer to talk. I didn't hire Margelle Barrett, who used to do the voice, partly because she passed away a few years ago. But what I did was I used Amazon Polly, which is one of their services, to get the computer to talk. And it was easy. It was literally, I think 4 or 5 lines of code, and then after that I could just literally say something, and the Amazon cloud service would make my app do some speaking. So very easy to do. And Richard Hatherall is the CEO of Apache, has got some very good examples, and I know he's got some new things planned as well, and we're actually going to do a specific session about the Apache components, Apache SDK, because it is very interesting what you can do. Amazon is probably, almost easily the biggest cloud provider out there. They provide things like S3 buckets, which allow you to store your data. They include things that allow your programs to run triggered from things in the cloud. Obviously there's the Amazon Alexa devices and a few other things as well that are really probably the first useful digital assistants that came out. There was Siri and there was a few other things as well, but the Amazon version was quite powerful because of the AWS interactivity, and that is something you can use straight away with Apacept. It comes included, I think, with Enterprise and Architect. And if you just go to their site and have a look, there's all sorts of examples. Like I say, we are going to do a webinar specifically showing the features of the Apacept AWS SDK, because there's just a whole bunch of things going on that it does. Other third-party solutions, IntraWeb. IntraWeb is included with some versions of RAD Studio, and you can also purchase it from them directly at a2z.com. And it provides, A2Z provide an Embarcadero version, which is version 14, I think, a slightly older version. This is completely free. However, it's a little bit restricted in what it can do. What IntraWeb does is allows you to code your web apps as if you're writing a Delphi program. So you will go in to IntraWeb and create an IntraWeb app, and you design your forms just as if you're designing a normal Delphi application. And you can drop them controls on, like combo boxes and lists, boxes and buttons, all the things that you're used to. And then you can hit compile, and it will create either a standalone app or a add-in DLL for things like Apache, and even a Windows service, which will serve up your web pages from IntraWeb automatically. There are no web pages, no HTML created as such. It's all self-contained within the IntraWeb app, which obviously makes it very secure. The big advantage as well with IntraWeb is that anything that your regular app can do, your Windows app, like access the hardware of the server it's running on, GPS location, all the things that you can't normally do in a web page, you can do in IntraWeb, because the IntraWeb server is running on the server, the actual physical computer server itself, and doing things there. Very, very interesting, and I actually used it myself several times for customer applications back in the day, and I'm going to show you a little bit of a demo later about how to what IntraWeb does. It's got absolutely everything you could want. First version 15 is the latest version and removes some of the restrictions, like what port you can run it on, and supports a few things like SSL and a few other things as well. And plus it supports Bootstrap. Bootstrap is a library from Google that allow you to do some very cool looking things with the web, style buttons and space things out and frames and things like that. And it allows the controls to be styled using Bootstrap, which is actually very useful. Another third-party solution, and probably one of my favorites, is TMS WEB Core. Again, I've used TMS WEB Core myself in some customer applications, and in fact in a very big client-server application. And TMS WEB Core is a fascinating product. It has some interesting capabilities. The way it works is it uses the Pasta.js library in the background to convert your Delphi code into JavaScript, into a single JavaScript app that you runs in your customer's browser, in their web browser, and creates pure HTML pages and CSS style pages, style files, should we say, automatically from your Delphi code. So you lay out your Delphi forms using TMS WEB Core components and probably something like their FNC components, and create your app just as you do normally in the RAD Studio IDE. And when you hit compile, what comes out of it is actually a bunch of HTML, just regular web pages. And this will run on any web server. There's nothing you need specifically special. You can copy it up to any provider. So if you're using something like DigitalOcean or GoDaddy or something like that, you can put those pages up using their web hosting. And when your customer goes to your website that you've created here, down will come a bunch of web pages, just as if you designed it in Notepad++ or Notepad or some other tool in writing HTML the hard way. Very, very interesting technology. I like it a lot. It's one of my favorites. Different from IntraWeb. IntraWeb is self-contained, and WebCore is giving you the HTML to use. Now, a good friend of mine and MVP, Dr. Holger Flick, has written quite a few books on this. I think 5 or 6 at the time that I'm recording this. And he's just had a recent one come out as well, which we're going to do a webinar about that as well, that shows you him creating a full application using Xdata and Aurelius in the background, which is another TMS technology. But very interesting stuff, and it's worth looking into. Both IntraWeb and WEB Core are great products, great solutions. The other interesting thing about WEB Core is that there are no restrictions. It can run on any web server, and I tested a lot of browsers, web browsers, iPads and Chromebooks and things like that. And because it's just regular web pages and CSS scripts and JavaScript, it'll just run on any web server and almost any target. I didn't actually find any device that it wouldn't run on. But they also take that a little bit further, so they allow you to actually create a thing called a PWA. A PWA is a progressive web app. So if you've ever been to a web page, I know in the United States doctors do this quite a lot, and it says this web page is available as an app. Would you like to install it on your iPhone or your Android phone? And you can hit yes. What it does is then downloads the website as a thing called a PWA, and from then on your PWA can do things like run offline when there isn't an internet connection. You probably need to read more about this. Just look up PWA or Progressive Web App. But TMS WEB Core supports the ability to take your Delphi written HTML page and create them as PWAs, which is something IntraWeb doesn't support. And that means that you can then include offline functionality. PWAs also get a few other capabilities that can do to access devices and sensors and things like that as well. It can also target Electron, which is my least favorite framework, but it's very popular. Electron is basically a special wrapper that wraps web pages and JavaScript pages and uses a thing called Node.js, which is a kind of operating system / language. And you can create Electron applications. If you've ever used anything like Spotify, their cross-platform app is or used to be written in Electron, and you can install it on anything, Linux, Mac, Windows, it will run. It includes automatic updating technologies and things like that as well. So with TMS WEB Core, you can target Electron if you want to. I've done this before in the past. Literally created a WEB Core app, hit a button, and boom, out came a PWA app as well, a progressive web app. Hit another button and bang, out came an Electron app. Very, very easy to do. Extremely simple, couple of clicks and off we went. In a challenge that I worked on a while ago, it took me a couple of hours to create the the original WEB Core app, which was like a proper HTML app, and then minutes, literally 2 or 3 minutes, to create a progressive web app version of that set of web pages, and then another couple of minutes to create an Electron application. There's nothing like this faster on the on sale anywhere, as far as I'm aware. It's quite incredible, and all power to TMS, one of our tech partners, for providing this. They also have a very interesting technology called Miletus. Now what Miletus does is it is a cross-platform wrapper, a bit like Electron. It's kind of a competitor for Electron. And with Miletus, you can target absolutely anything, including the Raspberry Pi. Now what you can do with this is you can create your app using Delphi, just writing regular Delphi code, and use WEB Core to create all the forms and put all the components on and add all the functionality. Then target Miletus, and Miletus then wraps that and provides you access to things that you cannot get in a normal web page as well. It will encapsulate it just like Electron does, so you can do things like open files on the file system and it looks like a regular application, as if you'd written it in normal Delphi. Very interesting, very, very useful functionality. I quite like Miletus, and I'm going to show Miletus later on in our series when we talk about the Raspberry Pi. I'm going to target the Raspberry Pi in other ways as well in an upcoming webinar, but also I'm going to show how Miletus works, because it's definitely worth looking into. And by the way, when you create web core apps, you don't actually have to create the HTML. It's done for you automatically as you design the forms in the normal RAD Studio IDE. But if you want to, you can get a web designer to design the HTML and then get your application to just link to that HTML page. So a proper web designer designs the HTML and styles it and does all those things, and then you can get your code to actually interact with that that set of web pages. Very, very interesting technology. I like it. It works very well. Another third-party solution is UniGUI. UniGUI is interesting in that it also provides another alternative way of getting your apps out onto the cloud and also providing web solutions that are web pages. It can turn your application into a web server, actually a web app. Web server is not quite an accurate description there. It can make the UI work over the internet. It does this using a thing called Sencha, which is actually an IDEA product, and Sencha.js. And they've got 3 different editions: a personal edition, a pro edition, and then the complete edition. The personal edition has got, I think, a restriction on 30 concurrent users at once. Pro has got unlimited, and complete has got everything but the kitchen sink, as you would expect. Otherwise, why would they call it complete? It works by providing a comprehensive set of components of its own, a bit like TMS WEB Core does as well, and it includes, as you can see that little screenshot there, toolbars and trees and graphs and various other things. I like it. It's interesting. It's not one I've personally used, but I have come across it. The price for it is actually very reasonable as well. It's an approachable amount of money to purchase. Not included for free, but I think they do have some trials as well that you can try out. That's UniGUI. Okay, so now let's go to a demo and see what we can do to create a few cloud-based apps and run in the cloud. Okay, so the first application I'm going to show you is going to be a TMS WEB Core application, just because it's fairly easy to do. There are different options. Bootstrap is more fancy and pretty. Web application is your basic bog standard web app. Because I'm going to do a demo, let's just show what the basics are like. So it looks like Delphi. It looks like a standard project. I'm going to create a folder called test with WC1, just because I can. We're going to call it that. And we're going to call the project. Now you notice it's offering to save the HTML there, test WC1. And then finally, it's going to ask me to save the project, test WC1. Seems a little bit unnecessary, but it's not, because you're actually creating 3 different files, like so. Now, you'll notice down at the bottom here that there is a HTML tab. And that is actually something that you can give to a HTML web designer, your regular web designer, and they can put some stuff in there and create it, make it look pretty. But what we want to do is just start off by doing it the Delphi way. So we are going to choose a panel, and because it's TMS Web, we want a web panel. And just like we have before, we're going to align that at the top of the screen. We'll get rid of the caption. People say that's the most useless property, caption on a panel. And we're going to also choose on the palette, we're going to choose a calendar. Put it in there, and again hitting F11 to go to the properties. We're going to say align that to client. Now this is going to be particularly ugly, but let's not worry about that. And then finally we're going to choose a button, a web button. Now they support all sorts of other controls and different styling and things like this, but this is a bit of a quick and dirty demo. So we're going to say show the date, and I think you can guess what this button's going to do. That when someone clicks on it, what it's going to do is it's going to show the date selected in the calendar. So that's Web Calendar 1 is the name of the control here, Web Calendar 1, and all this is using is the standard Delphi language, show a message, format date and time, the day of the week, the month, the actual dates, you know, the 7th, 18th, 23rd or whatever, and the year. Okay, now this is where the interesting bit happens. If we hit F9, what happens is it goes away and compiles the app, and then it will, you can't see it because it's in a different window, it will run the app in my default browser because that's how I've got it set up. And you'll notice that the calendar works as you would expect, and it's looking fairly nicely styled, but I can add bootstrap, and I've got full control over all these colors even though it's a web app. And now I can say show the date, and it says June the 5th 2024, which is actually correct. Now in the meantime, down in my little system tray, what you can't see is a little web server running. Okay, so how does it do that? And incidentally, if I hit F12 and bring my web browser where you can see it, like so, in here I can see all the source code of what's being run. But what's even more interesting is that I can actually see the Pascal source code of everything that's running, including my little demo app that I'm just writing just a second ago, test WC1. And even if I go down to it, I can see, let's see if I can drag this out of the way, I can actually see the source code of my program in my browser. Now this is Microsoft Edge, and there is the actual source code, and as you can see there's the DFM and all the rest of it, but you can see my line of code. Very interesting. I can also have the browser console come up, the web browser console. If I just get rid of that for a second, you can actually add breakpoints as well. So with this version of Web Core, I can actually set a breakpoint in the IDE, and then when it hits the breakpoint, it will actually break from this browser and go out. You can emit things to the web browser console and do lots of exciting things like that, just like a regular web program, because that's effectively what it is. So very interesting. Now, if I just close this for a second and go back to the app, you can see all the regular Delphi code here. But what has happened? Where is our actual program? Well, if I go to the project folder, TMS Web, in here is all of the regular HTML and JavaScript that's been created. And in fact, in this particular case, I don't know if I can open it with anything. Let's see if I can open it with Ultra Edit. You can see that's just regular HTML that's been created. And the thing that runs are a bunch of scripts. There's ways of saying I just want one script, or it'll break all the scripts down separately and load them in. It's very interesting, very powerful. All you deploy is just the regular HTML. There's nothing special. And off it goes and runs. And you can convert this into a progressive web app and so on and so forth. And there's lots of different controls, as we talked about before, to go with the Web Core, and they support all their FNC stuff. So that is a Web Core app. Now let's create another app. This time we're going to say File New Other, and we're going to go to IntraWeb, and we're going to say run the IntraWeb application wizard. Okay. So I'm going to click this. We're going to have a standalone application, but it could be an Microsoft IIS extension, or it could be an IntraWeb library, which means it can run by other programs. But we're just going to choose standalone application. Could be using HTTP/SYS, which is more a modern way of supporting HTML apps. We're going to say test. Test iWeb 1, like that. and we are going to say OK. It just tells us what it's creating, and after a couple of seconds we will get a app. Double click on here, and just a form, just like you've seen before, exactly the same thing as you're used to. We are going to go to down to IntraWeb. I bet I missed it. Here it is, and we're going to choose a region. Now, IntraWeb's controls are slightly different to your regular controls. So a region is basically their version of a panel, and you've seen in the demos before I've chosen a panel, but it's the same principle, aligning it to the top, and we're going to choose a button and put the button up there. And you can already see it looks a bit like a Delphi 7 app, if anything. We're just going to change the caption on that button to say show the date. Oops. Oh dear, show the date. There you go. Live coding. And the final thing we're going to choose is calendar control. Okay. Calendar control. Here we go. IntraWeb calendar. Now, the same thing as I've done previously. There are these apps don't support styling as such. Actually, the TMS WEB Core does, and I forgot to show you that. You can actually say pick up the browser style, and it will go black if that's what it's done. But there are various colors that I can pick, and I can change the font and all the rest of it. I'm going to start off with it showing the default colors. If I double click on the button, just as if it's a regular Delphi app, and then I'm going to cheat by copy and pasting something over here so I don't have to type things live and make a mess of it. You'll notice that show message, in other apps you've seen me just type in show message, but actually with IntraWeb it's web application, not application. So by default in a regular Delphi app, it's the application object that does the show messaging. But in an IntraWeb app, there's a thing called a web application, and that's doing the show message. And apart from that, format date time is exactly the same. We're actually talking to our IntraWeb calendar control, and we're choosing the selected date. And if you just go back into here and choose this, you can see there's a selected date property. If I click on save and then run it, what will happen is I'm just going to say allow for that. And then what I get is, because I've said as a standalone, you can get rid of this. This is the default controller. This is almost like a web server. So this allows me to debug. I wouldn't deliver my actual IntraWeb app like this, but if I click on here, it will actually run in my default browser. Now, I know the fonts look ugly. I'm doing IntraWeb a disservice here by having those ugly fonts, but let's pick the 18th, okay, and then click on show the date, and you can see Thursday the 18th. If I keep going and choose August the 13th, for example, I've selected that, and now when I say that, it says okay. Now, the app is running like a regular app. The difference between this and WebCore is that you can't really see anything apart from the HTML because all of the control is in the background via the IntraWeb stuff. Now, what about if we've got an app that we want to just going to get these out of the way to run that does something a little bit more powerful? What can you really do with these executables? Well, I'm going to run an example app here that is a live app that's actually used by customers. So this is running port 8094. I'm going to click to test this in. This is an IntraWeb app, so this is running as a service. The reason it's black is because I've got dark mode turned on, so all this part is regular Delphi, and when I run it, it will open in the browser. You can see how fast it is. If I click on this and then say password, I can log in, and this will work on an iPhone or an iPad or something like that. Now, if I go into here, then I can call a function. This is running some PHP in the background and choosing, by the way, these names are all fake, but it's choosing a report. But let's say on the fire report, well, amber means it hasn't heard anybody for ages. So let's do something cool. Let's go to the web clock in, and we'll just say remote, and we've clocked in. Okay, we go back to the menu and now say who's in fire report. You can see Aaron Adams is there. So this is all controlled by IntraWeb, and this is an example of a genuine program that is live and out there being sold. So IntraWeb's very, very powerful. There is a WEB Core program that does very similar things, works slightly differently. I can't show you that because the information is confidential, but I've worked on a very, very big WEB Core product that does even more than this and is extremely powerful. So these are the kind of things you can do to make your apps run in the cloud. I've only scratched the surface. Coming up in a future webinar, we are going to have an app that will do Internet of Things and connect to some devices and things like that. In that demo, I'm going to actually show you some programs that are running on a cloud service, probably DigitalOcean, but it might be Amazon. And you will be connecting to those apps that are running in the cloud completely truly as apps that are running as web services and servers out there on the internet. And it will then be talking to devices. We're going to have a little receipt printer and a barcode reader and a mobile app, put everything together and have it running separately. Cool stuff, huh? Well, that was a longer presentation than normal, but I wanted to go through a few different bits and bobs. Lots of questions, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. I was going to say something about the web app. Yes. What I didn't show you in that final demo where I showed you the IntraWeb app, one of the things it does is when someone actually clocks in for work, thank you, Marcel. Marcel says, thanks for the webinars. Hey, you know, it's all about spreading Delphi around and making sure that people, I believe it's a great way of writing programs, RAD Studio, and cross-platform programs and desktop and client server and server apps. And so it's not difficult for me to, you know, discuss the product. I just say, you know, yes, we do have sound here, Mohammed. So I don't know what's happening. But at least I believe I've got sound. Yes, I'm being told I've got sound. But yes, I'm just talking about the product. I believe in it. That's why I am Embarcadero's developer advocate. It's not like a marketing thing. I mean, I genuinely believe it's the best way of writing code. So anyway, the point I was making was in the IntraWeb, Stephen's off to Ambridge. That's a reference to yes, a radio show called The Archers in the UK. Good luck, Stephen, and say hello to the Archers from me. The IntraWeb app, the thing I didn't show you when people were clocking in and out, you saw there was an in and an out button there. What happens with the IntraWeb app as well is it actually gets the location of the employee. So when they clock in on their iPhone, if the iPhone supports it, it calls one of the functions that allow it to actually get the location of the employee. The reason you want to do that is if your person's remote, let's say it's a salesperson or a delivery person or a visiting nurse, for example, or I don't know, a person cutting the grass, and you want to know where your person is starting work because they start work in different locations every day, but you want to know when they started work and when they're finished. Then what happens with this IntraWeb app is they can clock in and it will actually grab the GPS location and it's accurate. I mean, like to 25 feet or something random. I forget what the actual accuracy is, but you can certainly tell the difference in my house between one part of the house and another, which is quite amazing. And then people can go back and say, hey, where was Jim when he clocked in or whatever. And it's also useful for fire reports. So if there's a fire, and the person is clocking in and it says remote, then you know not to go and look for them when you're trying to evacuate the building, which is also quite important. Is you can say exclude all the people that are remote, i.e. not on site, and the people that are left that are clocked in, then you know you need to go and find and look for them if when you do your fire report roll call, you can't find that person. And it's a life-saving opportunity. So people are pinging me on Teams, and even though I've blocked it, it still goes through. So anyway, G422 T 422-4T. Okay, well, I'm not even sure. I don't even want to know what that means. But you mentioned Sencha earlier. Do you have any plans to do any webinars on this since it is included with RAD Studio Architect? Actually, I have been asked about Sencha. I don't normally work with Sencha. That's actually another part of the company. It's not really Gaza. Oh, I get it. Gaza. All right, Gaza T. All right. That's what he says the handle represents, the one that's there. How shall I answer this diplomatically? I don't know enough about Sencha to really present a webinar on it. I'm prepared to, if enough people want me to do that, then I'll go off and learn it and have a play with it. But I'd prefer to talk from experience. So nearly all the things you see me presenting, I actually use or have used over the years. And so as I tell people regularly, I'm not just like some salesperson or something. I get up every single day and I write code. I am an actual developer. That's what I do. I've always wanted to be a developer since I was about 14 years old. I remember the day I wanted to become a developer, and that's what I do. And I love that job. I've done it for more than 38 years now, and I'm older than I look, and or maybe I'm as old as I look. And I still love writing programs, and I would do it if I was a multimillionaire, and I wish I didn't have to work. Then I would do it for fun, because I'd probably do it for charity or something. I do some charity stuff as well, but that's how much I love development. And so I am prepared to learn Sencha, but most of the things I talk about are stuff that is actually genuinely used. And I haven't used Sencha in anger myself, but it is a product that we sell, and I'm quite happy. If there's enough demand for it, or my bosses tell me to, then I'm quite happy to do a webinar on it. Let's go to the pinned questions that I've got, because I've got a long one from EDR1K, which I'll come to in a moment. This is an interesting one. When people say who uses RAD Studio and who uses Delphi, 3.5 million people around the world are customers of one way or another, some with the CE version and some with paid versions, or even counting backwards to, there are a lot of people who use Delphi 7. I mean, it was a great version, but so many things have been added to RAD Studio since Delphi 7. You should probably look at newer versions. I know we've got an issue with our servers at the time we record this. That is almost fixed. We've fixed most of them, and we're nearly there with the others. And I know it's been a problem, and we put some updates out to sort of say we're really sorry about this. It's just a victim of a cascade of hardware things, and that blew up parts of our network center, and they're doing something about that to try and help that in the future. Anyway, so ADB Razak says in Algeria, the government and the Ministry of Vocational Training rely on Delphi in the training program under a programming specialty certificate database. Fantastic. There are lots and lots of big organizations out there. I think American Airlines uses it. There are just dozens and dozens and dozens of very big household names. We've done some slides with them on before, but there are a lot more people that use Delphi than you think. And the trouble is that Delphi programs are so stable, and this is not a hoax, this is a fact. Delphi programs run and they keep on running, and they don't throw up weird errors all of a sudden, or some random error message in the web browser. They actually keep working. And this is a good thing, but it's also a curse. The reason is it doesn't create enough of a kerfuffle for people to know that Delphi is being used, because it just works. I mean, Skype for the longest time was written in Delphi, and so many other very well-known applications. And Microsoft bought Skype, and then they moved on to Microsoft Technologies. And one could argue that it's not as good as it used to be. when it was a Delphi app. But I'm sure there's circumstances that made that happen. But yeah, good to hear about someone using it. Daniel pointed out that when I showed the IntraWeb's app and said, oh, you can change the colors, that there is a CSS property which can allow you to link to an external style sheet. That's actually very true of all of the frameworks that I showed you that create web apps. Not the server apps like Indy and things like that, but the IntraWeb, TMS WEB Core, and UniGUI. All of those support CSS, which is HTML type styling, and allow you to style your app. As you saw after I did the ugly demo with the calendar with IntraWeb, as you saw the actual IntraWeb app, which is a live IntraWeb app, you saw the black screen, and then we hit on it and person clocked in and out. That is all using Bootstrap styling and CSS. And the CSS is done professionally. And in fact, there's a bigger app that I worked on. As I said, I can't show that because it's got confidential information in it, but that uses CSS very heavily, designed by a CSS expert. And then the Delphi code, the business logic is written behind the scenes. So, excuse me. So there's a lot going on, that you can do. I've focused really on showing things that are creating web pages for people. But in an upcoming webinar, we're going to do an Internet of Things demo where we're going to have some little devices. And in fact, I usually have them near me. I've got one here and one here. I'll have to hold these in front of me, otherwise you won't be able to see them because of the green screen. But this is an IoT device. And it's a very cool device. It's called Seed, but this is a little mini computer. It's got a color screen on here and some buttons that you can use to indicate things and capture them. And we're going to talk to this with Delphi and Arduino type stuff. This is also a mini computer as well. This is another one that's got a color screen on. I really like this device. It's a very cool device. And it's got, you can just about see it on my camera, I think. It's got some connections on the back and a diagram that shows you what to connect up. But this can be programmed via USB-C, and it can drive relays and things like that. And then this one is from a company called Shelly. And what this does is this is a relay that's connected to Wi-Fi and the internet in general. And I can turn this relay on and off. So if you think of your Amazon devices where you can say, hey, I'm going to use a different word because I've got one of those devices behind me. Hey, Amazon, turn off my hallway lights or something like that. Well, this device can make you create your own. So if you've got a building where you want to control certain devices automatically, I don't know what it would be. Well, turn on the kettle or something, or turn on the coffee maker, or set the axe to sever the heads of the guilty or something like that, then you can do these devices. And I'm going to show you how to program those as another internet connected thing. So that's why I wanted today to show you more about the stuff to do with web pages that are coming down from the internet and talking about RAD server and things like that. But when we do the IoT devices thing, we're going to program this in all sorts of exciting ways. Because it's quite fun. And I'm also going to get a robot arm, and I collect knives. It's one of my little foibles, and I actually have a sword as well. If you know me or you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, you'll see Jim McKeith and I sword fighting in Delphi helmets the other day. So I'm going to do a robot arm. I'm going to try and get it to do throw knives as well. So throwing knives at stuff. If I can't do that, it might be something like a paper airplane, but we'll see. But if I can get a strong enough robot arm to do that, then we might do knife throwing. So I wanted to emphasize that what we've shown today is really only one half of the whole creating cloud apps, because there's much more to it. But we need to start somewhere, and where we wanted to start was showing what you can do with web pages and stuff like that. Edric, okay, this is a long question. I'm going to try and address it. He has a Windows native Delphi app, and it works with a SQL Server database. And he's recently started developing an FMX multi-device mobile app, and I want to integrate this app to pull data from the database. Okay, And then he goes on to say some other things as well. Let me just let's just go back down to the all comments. Yeah, there you go. Sorry, many buttons. And where's the rest of his questions? And he said, should he, my question is, should I develop and install a DataSnap server that communicates with the SQL database so my app can pull data from the DataSnap using the CRUD functions? Or should I just look into migrating my whole SQL database into something like Interbase and just uploading it to the cloud in this second option? Is the DataSnap server still required? Okay. And also any recommendations on where I could start educating myself on this topic. Sorry for the long text. Not a problem. That's why I'm here. Okay, so this is my advice. Okay, if you are going to expose your data to the internet, then you should use some form of middleware. Okay, and DataSnap, RAD Server, Xdata, which is TMS's option, and a few others like that, create a middle layer, the sandwich filling in a sandwich. Okay, so your apps, plural, desktop and mobile, talk to that middle layer, and that middle layer is either Xdata or RAD Server or DataSnap, and then that talks to the database. Two reasons why I would suggest doing it that way. First of all, at some point in the future, you may want to create some changes to your database. Okay, your apps shouldn't need to know what the structure is of the database. There should be an API that they communicate with to get all employees, or I don't know what the actual use cases that you're using, but there might be something like getting all employees or getting all orders or getting all the names of all the guilty. And you want to return a list. If you're going to use middleware, then it's more efficient to do that with the middleware talking to the database, because it can cache data, but also, more importantly, it can implement the security that's needed. If you were to use something like SQL Server or MySQL, you tend to be using a known port, and in MySQL, the case is 3306. And the security for that is actually quite difficult to implement. It also means that your apps are having to use credentials directly to that database that's been exposed to the internet. I have seen tools I've said this before in another webinar, I've seen tools used that can send 1.5 million requests to an endpoint within a couple of seconds, trying to exploit it. And this was a very professional attack, someone trying to destroy the customer and get the data. But it was over 1 million requests. Your little server, if it's just a MySQL port that's opened up, unless you're very, very good, or SQL Server or any of those, unless you're very good at configuring the security, you're going to get absolutely hammered. So that's one thing. Secondly, yeah, so you have to use SSL and you have to use encryption or SSH or something like that. Secondly, your end user apps, your mobile app or whatever, has to then contain the database credentials to connect to that that database. And even no matter how you encrypt it in your app, it's still going to have those credentials in there. Much better to have the middleware that can implement things like two-factor authentication and blacklist people and all the other things that you would need to do, which database is not quite so good at. If you're using SQL Server, or if you're using MySQL or Postgres or any of the other databases, there are technologies there for managing people's access. But the minute you expose that directly to an app, you're creating a very weak link there, and also a fragile link in terms of how do you what if you want to add load balancing to the database? And I know you might say that's never going to happen, but it might do. If you want to add load balancing, if you've got that single database access point, it's quite difficult to cluster the databases out on a big level. Again, it might not be relevant in your case, but it could be. So I would definitely say that use some form of middleware. Now, DataSnap is one thing. RAD Server is definitely another thing, but there is a cost involved in RAD Server, depending on what version of RAD Studio you're using, and you know, Xdata or Radius, all those options from other people are a good choice. Interbase has got some very good features as well for how it communicates with people. But that would be my advice. If you're ever going to have an app that isn't directly on the same network but is across the internet, use middleware every single time. It's just common sense. And the advantage is if someone does find a way of breaking your security, with middleware, you can implement more security. Two-factor authentication is the de facto standard now, but even that is people are going towards having things like pass keys and stuff like that. So log in with Microsoft, log in with Google, and all those kind of things. So definitely middleware. Can RAD Server be used with TMS WEB Core? Okay, so right, RAD Server can be used with anything because basically behind the scenes it's a Delphi app. And so when you say, can it be used with TMS WEB Core, do you mean can the TMS WEB Core app talk to RAD Server? Yes, it's just a REST server. And so it's not difficult. There's nothing special in what RAD Server is doing in terms of the communication. There isn't like a special RAD Server client app. What you're actually doing, excuse me 1 second. Talking too much, which for me is unusual. But RAD Server is just exposing REST endpoints and stuff like that. So TMS WEB Core can definitely communicate with it. It can also do MQTT and all sorts of other things as well. So yeah, no problem with WEB Core or indeed any other technology. It doesn't have to even be a Delphi app. It could be, some horrific JavaScript app if you really insist, or Python or PHP or anything else. So yes, it can definitely work with that. This one is, can I run my native app on a service like OneDrive? The problem with OneDrive is that it caches data. I would suggest not using OneDrive as a storage medium that is active, because OneDrive typically sends stuff out to multiple devices that are signed in with the same credentials. It's not before long you manage to corrupt your data. So yes, you can run your native app on a service like OneDrive, but I would suggest not doing that. I would say don't do that. That's a bad idea. But yes, you can if you really want to. Jacob also says, if I understand correctly, at the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned that Windows has such capabilities, or do I need to rebuild my application to work in the cloud? This is probably it's probably best answered by saying, okay, what you've got is you've got an app that runs somewhere. And as I said at the beginning of the presentation, the cloud is just a server or a computer out there on the internet. It's a fancy name for lots of people's computers. So depending on whether your cloud server is a genuine server like a computer, and depending on whether that's running Windows or Linux, then you can run your apps on the cloud. But are they? Does your application need to be rebuilt to work in the cloud? Now, it depends on what technology you're using. There are some technologies like that allow you to service your regular desktop app into the cloud. You drop a component on and it does some weird stuff. I haven't really covered that, but I would say you would need to decide what it is without knowing what your particular solution is, and we haven't really got time for it now. I would say that there's going to be some work required before you can do it, but your existing application can talk to the cloud, and your cloud database or facilities can be in the cloud, and your existing application can talk to it, and new applications like mobile devices can talk to it as well. So again, it's just one of those things. Probably need to know some more information. Romilda Quellar says, "Oi, okay." And another question. You can ask as many questions as you like. I don't mind. Last one in, I promise. As I understand, RAD Server needs an inter-database DB for authentication. Yes, that's correct. It includes an interbase. I'm not an expert on this, what version of interbase. If you look at the RAD Server page, and I can put that QR code up, it will tell you. But if not, just ask one of our people, because they would just love to talk to you at length about what RAD Server can do. I honestly don't use that often. I'm doing other types of apps that don't need that. But they'll tell you what version of interbase. But yes, it does need interbase in the background for authentication. It's just how it stores it. It's a bit like some apps on iPhone devices use SQLite or something like that to store their database. What interbase does that as well, because it's got some good encryption in it. So that's that. Okay, I think that's it. I'm going to go and eat something in a moment, which is why I'm getting reflux. Edric, thanks for the great webinars. Well, I hope everybody gets something out of this. I'm doing it because I love the language. I love the product. I don't love our servers being down, but we're fixing that. And boy, a lot of people tell me how much they hate the servers being down, but we're getting there. It's nearly there. I can't give you a deadline for sure. But I know they're making some great strides in repairing it. And yes, we are doing something about making sure those servers don't go down again in the future. Nobody can guarantee it, because computers, they're fickle. They like to break down, and you think you've got all the bases covered and everything's, working fine, and then something horrible happens and it goes down. But anyway, meanwhile, I'm glad people find some value out of the webinars. That's what I'm here for. Anyway, I'm going to call it a day, and I will see you next time. Next time, I can't remember what we're doing. Let me just go and look at my see my overlay. Yeah, next time we're going to create an app for the Raspberry Pi, step by step. So you'll have to come along for that. We're going to do it in a couple of different ways. We're going to put Android on a Raspberry Pi and run it that way. We're also going to use some third-party solutions for that as well. And later on, all the slides and this video that you saw earlier on will be up on the blog and actually on our YouTube channel as well. And if you open your IDE and look down in the Learn tab, all of the videos that are in this series will be appearing there as well. So there's no excuse. You should be able to see everything. All right. Well, thanks very much, everybody. And I'll see you next time.